Association. Thank you for joining us for our Expert Leadership Series, which is an ongoing series on all manner of transit topics and training and peer sharing from the SWTA Nation. If you don't know a little bit about us, I'll tell you just in a couple seconds, but I'm the executive director here at SWTA. I'm joined here today by Kristen Joyner, our executive trainer and consultant. She's also my predecessor at SWTA. Now she's helping us out in all manner of things, and she'll be doing most of the facilitation and discussion here today. So thanks for joining us. Just to tell you a little bit about who we are at the Southwest Transit Association, if you're not from the SWTA Nation, as we call it, which is the 8-state region, kind of in the south and west portions of the United States. Those are the states that are in our area and the SWTA Nation. And we do a number of activities throughout the year for the benefit of our members, but also the larger transit industry. And we have trainings, we do all kinds of communications outreaches. We go to Washington when we're allowed to and meet with members of Congress and the FTA. So we do most of the things that most transit associations do, which is represent our members and advocate for more and better transit across the region. So that's a little bit about who we are as an organization. And here are just a few things of the work we do. This is obviously part of our expert leadership area of focus. It's SWTA. We provide training and sessions that really cultivate ideas and knowledge sharing amongst our industry. We do work in Washington, as I mentioned, on the legislative and policy fronts. We have a couple conferences, either in person or virtually now every year as part of our education aspect. And we just make sure our members know what's going on with each other and with the industry. So that's just a little bit about SWTA. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, again, I'm Rich Sampson, Executive Director here at the Southwest Transit Association, and thanks for joining us. This session, I believe, Kristen, is being recorded, correct? So just know that we will record this session. None of it is for attribution or on the record today. So if there's any media types, we'll be glad to get you in touch with anybody who's speaking today. But anything said and viewed here is off the record and not for publication or attribution anywhere. So just to get those housekeeping details off the bat. This isn't so much be a bunch of presentations and talking at you. We do have a few folks lined up who are experts, but it's not going to be a lot of presentations. It's going to be talking and engaging with each other, and we hope that you all are ready for that kind of format today. So we're going to be talking about how do you get folks to the polling locations and make sure that everybody has a good chance to vote. Most people are paying more attention to this election than ever before, and transit has a key role in making sure everybody can get to the polls. Beyond that, though, and we're hoping that we have just a great election day in this country next week, and there aren't issues of major concern and unrest, but if there are, and we have to kind of hope for the best, but plan for the worst. What can transit agencies do to prepare themselves for those situations, and what kind of policies do agencies use for those situations? And Kristen and our guests are going to take us through those topics today. So that's basically where we're heading this afternoon. We'll hope to go for about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how long you all want to engage with each other. As always, if you would like to reach out to one of your peers here on the line today and you can't quite get them through Zoom, feel free to reach out to me at rsampson@swata.org, and I'll make sure that anybody that needs a connection can make that happen today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Joyner, and she's going to lead us through our discussion this morning. So thanks again, and do please share your questions in the chat box, and we'll get those answered as we go along. So Kristen, it's your show.
Very good. Very good. Hi, everybody. I'm happy that you're here, and I'm going to put you in Brady Bunch mode so I can see everybody really well. Doug Tisdale, love that pipe and your smoking jacket. So Doug has shown up in full regalia for this. I'll tell you why I wanted to put this together, this particular session. I was meeting with some transit agency CEOs in a state outside of SWTA, and heard their very real concern about Election Day and maybe the days following, given that this is just a wacky year. It is really odd, and people are they're either golden or they have behavior that we haven't been used to seeing in quite some time. So knowing that transit is a key partner in every community that it's in, we want to make sure that transit is able to provide that safe, secure service to everyone who rides public transportation. So like Rich said, this is a peer-to-peer forum, and we're going to discuss security and communications preparations and plans for Election Day and the days to follow. We're going to do this several ways. We have polls, we've got chat feature, and if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you see the word chat at the bottom of your screen, you can just open that up and type hello to everyone, or you can talk privately to each other. If you want to do that, you can contact Rich and ask him any questions, and also our presenters today. We have an opportunity for a lot of question and answer along the way. And if we have plenty of time towards the end, which our plan is to have time for this piece of it, we want to do a breakout session where all of you go into smaller discussion rooms so that we can hear more intimately what you're thinking and what your ideas are. So this session is for you to learn and engage through dialogue, and again, minimal presentation. So Rich, would you like to go ahead and launch the first two polls for us? Or I guess, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Kristen. And we'll do one at a time here. Go ahead and answer here if your agency or system is offering or planning on offering free rides on Election Day. And we do have a option there if you're not at a transit agency does not apply. But go ahead and let us know what your agency's planning here for next Tuesday in terms of free rides, yes or no. And I'm not sure, Kristen, can you see the results on the screen?
I can see the results, and we'll give it just a little. We've got about 75 people who have who. I mean, about 77% of the people, sorry, have answered. And I'll tell you, it is, does your agency, and this is just in case you can't see the poll yourself and you want to just put this in the chat box, does your agency or system offer free rides on Election Day? And the answers are yes, no, uncertain, does not apply. So if you're unable to see the poll and you want to answer in chat, do so with yes, no, uncertain, or does not apply. And I'm going to close this out in 3, 2, and 1. And I'm going to share the results for everyone. So 72% of you, and by the way, you know, we were thinking, oh, maybe 25, 30 people would sign up for this. We had over 100 people sign up for this session. And right now we've got about 75 folks on the line. Some of you may be joining in groups as well. So I appreciate you all being here. 72% of you said yes, you're going to offer free rides on Election Day. 12% say no. 3% say uncertain, and 13% does not apply. So Rich, I'm going to stop sharing that, and why don't you launch the next poll?
All right. Let's get that one going here. Poll number 2 is, does your community expect any significant protests or unrest? And obviously that's the extent that you're aware of or that you've been following. We don't expect you to be the prognosticator of everything that's going to happen in your community next week, but just we're trying to get a sense of how folks are feeling, if they're expecting there to be concerns in terms of social unrest and protests. So thanks to everybody who's responding so far. Most folks aren't expecting significant protests so far, as we see here, Kristen, but we do see a number, 14% or so that are expecting something to happen. So of course, this benefits you, this discussion we're going to have, because you never know what may happen. So even if you're in the no camp on this one, it's better to be thinking and at least having some kind of expectations in case that does materialize.
So I'm going to end this poll then now and share the results, because what's interesting, Rich, is that we've got about 42% that say they're unsure if the community is expecting any unrest, and then another 15% 42% of a yes said no, we're not expecting anything in our community. And then Rich, if you could please, let's see, why don't you launch the preparation? This is a question about how your agency is preparing. So how is your agency preparing for Election Day and the days to follow? On this one, you can choose more than one answer. So you just choose as many of the ways as you want to from this list. And if you want to chat, then here are some of the answers. It's business as usual, no extra prep. Holding internal discussions with staff, connecting with law enforcement, hosting discussions with board members and elected officials, training and preparing reminders for drivers and operators, creating pre-prepared responses to common questions, and reviewing our or your communication plan.
Thanks, Kristen. We'll keep this open for just a minute. A couple of questions that came in the chat box. First of all, welcome to folks who have just joined. We had about 10 or 15 folks just join us. Welcome to SWTA's Preparing for Election Day. We're in the midst of just trying to figure out what you're all getting ready for next week, and we're running some poll questions to start. So thank you for everybody who's joining. And I just want to follow up to Doug Tisdale's question he's at RTD there in Denver. He says a number of his folks at his office are interested in viewing this afterwards. We will be sharing the link to the recording of this once we're done. So stay tuned for that. It will come to you. Everybody who signed up ahead of time, the recording of the session. So there you go, Doug, and hopefully you'll be able to share it to the folks there at RTD. So Kristen, if you want to just recap this poll again here.
Okay, listen, we've got most of the answers. Let's go ahead and end in 3, 2, and 1, and I'll share the results. Most of you are holding internal discussions with staff. About 39% of you say business as usual, no extra prep. And then the next highest answer is training and preparing reminders for operators. The next is connecting with law enforcement. Followed by reviewing our communication plan. And then there's a tie between hosting discussions with board members and elected officials and creating pre-prepared responses to questions. So we'll get into some of these as we go along. Some of these have to do with of course, operations, planning, security department. Some are communications and marketing. So with that, we'll stop sharing that. And let me move this out of the way. Okay. Now, what's the general role of transit in a crisis situation like this? How do we prepare our drivers to stay safe and know how to safely react and keep passengers safe? Here's what we know that transit does really well. Transit does operations and detours really well. Think about those special events in your communities that take place, or if there is hurricane evacuation or fires. You guys have experienced it all in the SWTA Nation. You also know how to properly staff. So sometimes it's an all hands on deck type of situation. Sometimes it is just making sure that you've got supervisors staged where they need to be in order to support the operations staff and make those critical decisions pretty immediately. And then the other two things that transit does really well, one is crisis communications and safety. So with that, I want to introduce you to Chief Spiller. He's the Chief of Police with the Dallas Area Rapid Transit. Chief Spiller is going to share with us a little bit about what DART is doing, and then we'll take time for questions and reactions or comments from you. Feel free to use the chat box at any point, and Rich will, after Chief Spiller finishes, then he can read your question, or you're welcome to let him know that you want to say something, and and then you can open up your mic. So with that, Chief Spiller, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Rich, for the opportunity to share with this group what we're doing here at Dallas Area Rapid Transit. And first and foremost, let me say on behalf of our president and CEO, Mr. Gary Thomas, as well as our board of directors, I must say I'm excited to be here to share what we're doing. So if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is talk about what we did prior to what we're doing prior to the election and early voting, what we have planned for the actual election day, and what our plans are afterwards. You know, and what we try to do here at DART, and let me go back and reiterate, I am the chief of police and emergency management here at Dallas Area Rapid Transit. So I have both of those key areas for dealing with disruptions of our system, especially when we're talking about protests. So let me talk about what we did prior to. As you all know, we here in Dallas, we've had protests continuously after the George Floyd incident up in Minnesota. Subsequently, we have very good relationships with our service area cities. And as you know, we service 13 cities here in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. The largest one being that of the city of Dallas, which is where most of the protests typically occur. So what we do is that the city of Dallas has a fusion center whereby they get intelligence information from the state, the federal level, as well as throughout North Texas. And we're right there with them because we have a majority of the cameras on our trains and buses. As those vehicles are moving throughout the system and people are riding, we can see who's riding, whether or not they're coming to protest or if it's just general riders. So that was part of our plan prior to George Floyd, and even thereafter. We use a similar plan for voting. Here in the state of Texas, they had early voting. Subsequently, we have personnel. We ride our trains. We have fair enforcement officers and police officers riding trains, even during the pandemic. And I must say, we have not had anyone to come down with COVID-19 as a result of riding trains. And our personnel have been very well with following the rules for CDC guidelines for the prevention of COVID-19. Subsequently, we don't have that many disruptions on our trains. So we were doing that as a result of George Floyd. We were doing it throughout the pandemic. We continually do it now. So we are viewed as being present on our trains and or at our stations by persons riding, even if they were going to their early voting locations. Here in Dallas, the American Airlines Center, which is where the Dallas Mavericks play, they open up their building and they are considered to be a super center. Subsequently, we have a station that services that area. So we have our persons on the platform at that location so that we can educate riders about trains, which train goes in which direction, because we have two of our light rail lines that come through there, the orange and green line, and we have our commuter rail, the Trinity Metro or Trinity Rail Express come through there also and stop at that station. So we have a presence there during the entire time that super center is open for early voting, and we'll do the same thing for November 3rd on the day of actual voting. And we also work very closely with our federal partners to include the TSA and the FBI. Just this morning, I was in a meeting with the executive board, of which I am a member of, with the FBI, with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, whereby we were getting information of groups that may come to Dallas or the North Texas region and what their intentions may be. So we as a group in the North Texas region here, Dallas-Fort Worth is what we call North Texas region, we all work together cohesively to make sure that we're all communicating from a police and emergency management perspective to know when and where these groups are moving. But more importantly, we as police departments have established relationships with local people or organizations that typically protest, so that we're friendly with them from the get-go. So if in fact they do have other violent extremists that try to get into their group, they have been very forthcoming and letting us know who those individuals are, what their intentions are, and made sure that they try to separate those peaceful protesters from those violent ones that want to come in and create chaos. So we have individuals as part of those groups also in civilian clothes, and you will typically find that with most police departments with their intelligence units. And here in the North Texas region, the Dallas Police Department, Fort Worth, Arlington, Irving, all of them are very well at doing that. And we know who the intelligence persons are in the crowd because we use what we call colors for the day. And those colors, whatever it may be, are supposed to be displayed in a certain location so that we can quickly discern who are the police officers that are in civilian clothes that's part of that group by that color and where it's located. So that's what we do for those protests. So along with what we do with the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, is that we have Viper teams that we work here with our airports. And Viper teams are what we call visible intermodal protective response teams, whereby we can call and ask for those Viper teams to come out and assist us in transit. And Viper teams are prevalent throughout the country from TSA at your airports, and they are and can and will come out and support you in the time of need. All you have to do is make that request. One of the other things that we've done very well here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area is that we have radio interoperability with all 13 of our service area cities. And all our officers or fair enforcement officers have to do is change their radio frequency, and they are quickly in contact with whatever city police department where they're located. And we have those procedures in effect, not just for voting, but we have that on a daily occurrence because we cover 700 square miles, which may or may not be as large as some of the participants on this call, but quite often when our people are out there by themselves and we can't get to them, our police communication center, will make that request for another city to respond to that person in need, or the person in need can make that call directly to that city. And with that, Kristen and Rich, that's a quick overview of what we are doing, what we have planned, and what we're capable of doing here. And I will gladly entertain any questions. I do see someone asked, is Viper team with TSA? And that answer is yes. And the correct acronym is VIPR. I'll entertain any other questions. I just saw that in the chat box.
Okay, great. You're a good panelist. You have your eyes on everything, but I would expect that of you, Chief, to have your eyes on everything, given given your position. So first of all, everybody go down to your reaction button on the bottom right. It has a little smiley face plus, and give the Chief a round of applause there for me. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? And we don't at this point. If you do, if you'll drop it in the chat box, and if you actually want to verbalize that, just let us know, and we'll have you unmute. So if there's no other questions, then what I'm going to do is just very briefly introduce you to Jeremy.
It looks like Doug has a question. I see his hand up there.
Oh, good, Doug. All right.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yes, Doug.
Chief, I thank you very much for being here and sharing your expertise with us. One question I have is, at the RTD in Denver, we've had a lot of discussion from board members relative to our internal police department and our contacts and contracts with other agencies. And one of the big issues that is always discussed is de-escalation of confrontational situations. And I'm wondering, do you have any special training that you've offered your officers in regard to de-escalation, particularly as we will have emotional times on Election Day and, as Kristen said, in the days following?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, let me say first and foremost, the state of Texas requires 24 hours of de-escalation training for all police officers in the state. Here in our department, we actually do 40 hours of de-escalation training and what we call also critical incident stress management. And it's not just for our police officers, but our fair enforcement officers are also trained, because we train them to the same level as a police officer for those type of things that they may encounter when they are out on the trains. And I will gladly say that with our fair enforcement officers, I can tell you that on average, they may write about 40 or 50 citations per day. And I will say that customers love them, whereby a police officer writes one citation, they are totally disgusted with them. But, and I think that's attributed to what our fair enforcement officers do. They are what I call some of our greatest ambassadors, because they are dealing directly with the customers each and every day. So for us, it's extremely important that we teach them about de-escalation, but more importantly, we teach them also about servant leadership. Here in our department, we do 40 hours training per year on servant leadership. And servant leadership is all about treating people the way you want to be treated, which I'm sure everyone here is familiar with. And my boss, Ms. Carol Wise, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, have what we call a 5-star customer service program, which has been implemented throughout the agency. And in that 5-star program, there are certain pillars that we all strive for. And so we're very fortunate. We do not have many encounters whereby someone de-escalates. Now, I will say that, but when those encounters do occur, our fair enforcement officers are taught to back away if they can't de-escalate it and call for the police. And the police comes, they continue that de-escalation, but there are sometimes de-escalation just fails. And at that time, we want to make sure we separate that individual from the rest of the passing customers, paying customers on the train, by either removing them, and then we will deal with them in a manner in accordance to our use of force or force resistance as to how we deal with that person as a police officer. And I will say that I'm looking again at the chat, there has been no specific threat to the state of Texas as far as disruptions, but protests pop up quite often in the city of Dallas at a moment's notice. And that's why it's important to be on those social media feeds, into Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those kind of things to see what's happening. And that's how our intelligence units throughout the police departments get that information. And by the way, tell Bob Gretto I said hello up there in Denver.
Chief, if you don't mind, I have a question before we let you go here. What's your department's, are you looking at any additional personnel on duty that night for election night? What's your plan for whatever specifics you can give us for election night or election day next week?
Because we have not identified anything that's going to occur, and that's as a result of talking with the FBI today, with our state as well as our local fusion centers. We don't have any indication that anyone is coming in here to disrupt anything. However, depending on how that election goes, we know anything can happen at a moment's notice. So what we have done is that we've canceled days off. So we're not bringing in additional people, but we do have them readily available through what we call our recall process, which we can implement at a moment's notice and get people in, as well as the city of Dallas has done the same thing. So we do have a plan should something occur. Otherwise, we're gonna let those people that are on duty do what they do, and we even have plans for them, so they will have their gear readily available should something occur in their area, and they can withstand they can hold their own until either we or one of the cities can get there where they need that help. And we pretty much know where those locations are going to be.
Thank you,
Very
Chief.
good. Very good. All right, I'm going to bring on Jeremy Towne. He is the Regional Security Inspector for Region 4, and that falls under the Transportation Security Agency. You know them as TSA. So Jeremy is a Regional Security Inspector for TSA, and his focus is on surface operations. So Jeremy, if you want to say hello, and I'll pull up your presentation for everyone to see.
Thanks, Kristen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well. And I want to check and make sure with Rich that that he is able to see this. All right, Rich, are you able to see the screen okay?
I can see it, and I can hear Jeremy as well.
Awesome. Okay, Jeremy, take it away.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Kristen and Rich. Thanks for having me here at the Southwest Transit Association meeting today. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, thanks to Chief Spiller also for going first and sharing his thoughts and security plans for his agency. I'm just going to give a real quick overview. I'm hopeful most of you know about the Transportation Security Administration, the surface side of the house. Obviously, we have a large presence at the airports. Anyone who's flown on an airplane has come in contact with TSA. A large focus of our agency mission is protecting our airports and our airplanes. However, when TSA was created, we were given oversight of security for all modes of transportation. So if it moves people or commerce, we have a role in helping protect those transportation entities, whether it's pipeline, ferries, school buses, trucks, freight rail, passenger rail, over-the-road buses. We work with it all. Unfortunately, there's only about 200 of us across the country, spread out over 49 offices. So you can see on the map there, we're broken down into 5 regions, 49 offices, and we have 200 TSIs, or Transportation Security Inspectors, located throughout those offices. So most of the SWTA group is located in my region, in Region 4. You can see Arizona's in Region 5 and Kansas is in Region 3. I do have counterparts in those regions that I can certainly put you in contact with, but you can certainly reach out to me and I can get contact information for anybody. So we can go on to the next slide. So what I want to talk about today is we do have a regulatory component. We do have rules and regulations that our TSIs, our inspectors, have to enforce, but I don't really want to talk about those today. What I do want to talk about are the voluntary assessments and the outreach programs that we have that are free and available to your transit agencies that we want to work with in partnership to help you improve the security of your system, to help you plan for unusual events or large-scale activities that may be happening in your region. Maybe you have a Super Bowl or a World Series coming to your city. Maybe there's a Republican National Convention or the DNC is coming. Maybe there's a festival like the Houston Rodeo, My Stock Show. Or maybe it's just an event like this, where you're going to have a lot of people not used to riding transit to go to boat. Maybe there'll be some unrest or some disturbances, and you want to help prepare. Well, we have 4 programs available to you free of charge that our inspectors can come help you with. The baseline assessment for security enhancement, our Exercise Information System, or EXIS. You're going to hear a lot of acronyms from me today. Security Enhancement Through Assessment, our SWTA program, and our Risk Mitigation Activity for Surface Transportation, or RMAST. So we'll go on to the next slide. So our flagship program is the Baseline Assessment for Security Enhancement. Basically, what will happen is one of our inspectors will come out to your agency, will review your security policies and plans, whether it's your SSP, maybe it's a security section in your safety plan, maybe it's part of your COOP, your Continuity of Operations plan. We'll interview department heads, whether it's human capital, your information technology. We'll even talk to frontline operators, the boots on the ground people, and kind of get a general overview of your system. We'll then compare it to industry standards that have been established by the Department of Transportation and Industry Working Group, and let you know where your agency is doing well, and maybe some areas for improvement, some areas where maybe you could do a little bit better. We can also provide you some options for consideration. We'll give you back a very detailed report. There'll be an executive summary. There'll be a there's about 200 questions in the overall assessment, about a 17-page report saying where you've done well, where you need to improve, some options for consideration, and we'll help you with those. If you can only work on 3 or 4, or funding's an issue, we can help you prioritize which ones of those things you should work on most of all. Our baseline assessment is great if you need to go and ask for money. Maybe you have a board of directors that you need to go. You have a federal government document here that you can present to them saying, hey, here are some shortcomings that were identified. We'd like some money to improve upon this. It's also useful for grant funding. We've seen quite a few of our agencies be able to go to FEMA or other federal or local grants and be able to obtain grant funding based on the assessment that we've done for them. And it's an ongoing process too. Once we come out, look at your programs, giving you some feedback, giving you this base assessment, we're not just going to walk away. We're going to help you improve in those areas that were identified as deficient. We're going to come back and reassess a couple of years later and show the improvement that your agency has made. It's going to be an ongoing partnership, but this is really the first step when we start working with an agency. This would be really the first step that we want to take to help see where your current security posture is and then how we can work together with you to help improve it. So on the next slide, one of those programs we have in place to help you improve your security is our Risk Mitigation Activities for Surface Transportation, or RMAST. And the VIPER program that Chief Spiller spoke about is one of the activities that falls under here. The VIPER program is really, was born, they're the federal air marshals, the FAMs. So we can't keep the FAMs in the air all the time, around the clock, 24/7. There's a high burnout in that job. So they rotate in and out. So when they're on the ground, when they're not flying, we use them to supplement law enforcement across the country. So again, like Chief Spiller said, you have a large-scale event, you have a Super Bowl, you have a convention in town, you need to enhance your transit security. Our VIPER teams can certainly come out and enhance existing law enforcement. That's one of the programs we have available. Another one of the programs available under the RMAST is training, free training available to your employees throughout your agency. Our transportation security inspectors will come out and do in-person training, or now in this COVID environment, we can actually do virtual training and train your employees. We have 5 major programs that we conduct training in. Our main focus is the First Observer Plus training, and that's really the See Something, Say Something program, kind of amped up a little bit. We talk about suspicious behaviors. We talk about what's the difference between unusual and suspicious, or what makes something suspicious. And then if you do determine that something is suspicious, how do you go about reporting it? Who do you report it to? And what kind of information should be reported? So we offer that training to your employees. We have our bomb experts at the airports come out, and they will do IED, or improvised explosive device recognition training with your employees. They have inert training devices, so they'll let your employees see what Semtex or PETN or dynamite looks like, what detonators and timers look like. They'll give hands-on demonstration of the types of explosives out there and how the bad guys are using them. Our law enforcement, whether they're the FAMs or our AFSDs, our Assistant Federal Security Directors for Law Enforcement, from the airports can come out and conduct active shooter training for your employees, and also human trafficking. Maybe your systems are being used to conduct human trafficking operations. We want to provide that awareness training to your employees as well. And then finally, we have field intelligence officers at all of our airports. There are our intel branch with TSA, and they can come out and give an intelligence brief specific to your mode of transportation and your location. So they can let you know what the threat is to your mode of transportation and the threat to the area of the country that you're in. And like I said, free of charge. We can conduct it virtually, so there's no in-person. We can do in-person as well. But if you have to have in-service for your employees, got some training gaps you need to fill, we'd love to be able to come out and provide that training to your employees free of charge. Our third program is the EXIS Information System, and EXIS is simply the tool we use to conduct tabletop exercises. You have your plans in place. You've trained your employees. The third step would be to actually let's run some drills and make sure people know what they're doing. We have 3 levels. We have a workshop, which is really kind of a small 2-hour tabletop exercise. Our inspectors in Oklahoma City actually have a workshop set up with Embark in Oklahoma City for this Friday to help them prepare for election day travels. We do an EXIS tabletop, and that's more of maybe a 5 to 6, 7-hour exercise where we'll get executive leadership in, maybe 15 to 20 players at the table and work through some scenarios. And we are working on a full scale. We also have a headquarters element. They do what's called an I-STEP, and that's a much larger program, usually more on a regional scale, multimodal scale. But we'd love to come in and help you folks with your exercises. Whether it's a simple workshop, a 1 or 2 hour workshop, or even a 4 or 6 hour tabletop. And if you would like to do a full scale, I know we did one with VIA in San Antonio not too long ago. We can also help you with those as well. And again, there's no cost to you. Free of charge. If you were to have an outside agency come in and conduct one of these exercises, we're potentially talking tens of thousands of dollars. And finally, our last program, and this is our newest program, is our SWTA program, or our Security Enhancement Through Assessment. And basically, what we're doing here is we're taking a policy or a program that you already have in place, and we're helping you assess it to make sure that it's effective. And the one that we do the most is the pre-trip inspection. So we know all of our operators are supposed to do a pre-trip inspection of the vehicle before they start. So what we do, we work with either your law enforcement branch or with, your operations group. We'll go out to your yard, our inspectors, and we'll place, maybe on 20% of your vehicles, we'll place a bag under the seat. It won't be hidden. It'll just be tucked under the seat there. And we'll see what percentage of your operators catch that on their pre-trip inspection. Nationwide, we found about only 35% of those bags are found, meaning either the operator's not doing their inspection or they're just doing it hastily and not catching it. So we collect that baseline data. It's a non-punitive assessment. No one gets in trouble. It's not a test. We like to say assessment. We'll come back. We'll do some of that training that we talked about, the First Observer Plus training, where we talked about why it's important to be vigilant, why it's important to look for suspicious items, what makes something suspicious versus unattended. We may have the bomb experts come in and give some IED, the bomb training, the improvised explosive device training as well. And then we'll come back 30 or 60 days later and do a reassessment. And we find between that first assessment and the second assessment, we find about a 40% increase. So we go about from a 30 to 35% find rate to a 70 or 75% find rate. And all we've done is we've just kind of reinforced that security note in the back of everybody's head. It's easy to become complacent. I've done these streets for 30 years. I've never found anything. But we just want to kind of put that nugget in the back of their head that it is important that they need to do that. And this really helps. And then we like to sustain that. So either we'll come out every 6 months and do it, or we'll work with the stakeholders that they can continue to do a sustainment program like this and just keep the operators on their toes. So those are our 4 programs. I'm always available. This last slide here has contact information for the Region 4. Every region has a regional security director. They're at the executive level within our agencies, so they have a lot of pull. Our regional security director in 4 is Melvin Caraway. He's located in Dallas, Texas. I'm his Regional Security Inspector, Jeremy Towne. My contact information is there. The rest of RSD Carolina staff is there. You can reach out to any of us at any time. We'd love to work with you however we can, whether it's a base or a CETA, an Nexus, or maybe some training. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm available for questions or comments. And again, thanks to Kristen and Rich for having me on today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I saw that there were a couple of questions. Rich, did you want to ask Jeremy those questions out of the chat box?
Sure, Jeremy, this is from Doug, who had a question earlier. What intel, if any, do you have regarding currently possible threatened election day disruptions with mass transit, either in the region or anywhere? And do you have a mechanism to keep transit agencies updated if any new intel does come in between now and then?
Yeah, so nothing targeting transit directly. Obviously, like Chief Spiller said, probably anything we see will be an indirect result of something not targeting transit, and transit will be affected. But we have no intel currently that any transit of any type, whether it's freight rail, passenger rail, OTRB, intercity bus, anything like that, from election. We do have our field intelligence officers. They are located at pretty much every large airport across the country, whether there's a surface component there or not. But if the situation changes, we do have people at headquarters dedicated strictly to the surface mode. We take all those reports you folks give us. We look at all the intel that comes in, and if there is a specific threat to any mode of transportation, our inspectors will be sure to get it out to those affected agencies immediately.
Very good. Okay, Rich, you wanted to launch a poll about right now? Yes,
I do.
Okay.
We're going to go ahead and launch a poll and see who out there has a policy at their agency, to the extent that you have policies for this type of thing, related to protests, civil unrest, or involvement in any kind of police activities. So let us know what you have at your agency. And then if folks that do have that kind of policy, if anyone's willing to talk a little bit about that or how it came about, I'm sure your peers would be glad to hear about that. So we'll just keep that open for a few more minutes. Most agencies do not have a specific policy on this, although there's probably other policies that cover this type of thing. But just a handful, about 14% so far, do have a policy in place. And then about 30% of folks are uncertain. So I'm going to go ahead and end and share the poll real quick so you can see those numbers I was speaking about. Kristen, are you interested in hearing from anybody that
I am. There's about 6 folks who said that you do have a policy related to protest, civil unrest, or involvement in police activities. So who would like to share from the group? I would love for you to just go ahead and unmute and then identify yourself, please. Dana, did I see you unmute? Bryant.
This is Gerald Jamil with Capital Metro.
Thank you.
We don't have a specific policy. It's more of operational SOPs related to the police department. At times, they need our vehicles to transport officers to locations. And it really governs the safety of the vehicles and how they're deployed and how the officers move them in and out to minimize any threats to the vehicles related to the protests. And then for this coming election, we have some planned communication procedures in place for our operators related to how they're going to be directed to handle those, because we had that happen over the summer, a couple of service disruptions where vehicles ended up in the middle of protests. And so we've got some procedures in place for the operators to follow.
Daryl, I'm sure if you're willing, and Houston Metro is willing to share those after the fact, I'm sure folks might be interested in seeing those if those are available for sharing.
Sure, we could do that.
And you can even, and if you have it available, you can share it right in the chat box as well. Hugh Mills from KCATA says that you guys have procedures. Do you want to unmute and share a couple of points of the procedures, Hugh?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, great. We had protests throughout the summer here, as many folks did, and I think Daryl's procedures, he kicked on are about the same thing we do. We do move police as necessary within the city to respond to civil unrest. We provide vehicles to the police department for witness protection, for warming buses for witnesses and victims, all of those sorts of things. And we have done it routinely as tasked by the city EOC. We are running a special bus service on election day out to Chief Stadium, your world champion Chief Stadium. And we're prepared for that by being in bed with KCPD. They are on our staff. We have KCPD officers, and likewise with both the chief and Daryl, we get our information largely through the Fusion Center. So the answer is yes, we actively work with our embedded police and our area police. We also have about 620 square miles and about 22 separate jurisdictions that we deal with.
Okay. I'd like to, well, and I will say that we're now having a chat war between Raider Nation and Kansas City Chiefs. So anybody that wants to join that discussion, you just go right ahead. I would like to move well, Jeremy, let me ask you a question. We have a lot of folks on this phone call that live in more rural parts of Texas, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arkansas, et cetera, Oklahoma. I do know that Topeka, Kansas, while that is a large city in Kansas, it's still a pretty rural area. Not much happens in Topeka in terms of craziness. But I do know that the transit system there has taken great strides to have TSA come out, as well as local law enforcement and even the fire department to come out and teach everyone how do you properly use a fire extinguisher. So given that we have folks here from more rural areas, Jeremy, do you provide these services in rural areas, and do you think that rural transit agencies need to be as vigilant as urban centers? Maybe not on the same scale, but do you think they need to still be vigilant?
Yeah, of course they do, and we do. We tend to focus within our offices are located in what we call a high threat urban area, and those are highly densely populated areas. So as you know, from our map earlier, you can see we're in Oklahoma City, we're in Dallas, we're in Houston, we're in San Antonio. But we tend to find that those larger transit systems in there tend to have a lot of resources available to them, whether it's funding, whether it's access to law enforcement. So we actually find that it's our transit partners in some more of those rural areas that don't get as much funding, don't get as much love, if you want to call it, that we really like to work with the most. So I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico for quite a while. We don't have a surface field office there, but our folks in El Paso routinely spend a lot of time in New Mexico and will work. I know they've worked with pretty much every single transit agency in the state of New Mexico. Our folks in Dallas cover Arkansas, and I know they spend a lot of time out there as well. So we do like to work with our rural stakeholders. And like I said, they don't normally get a lot of the love or a lot of the attention, but a lot of these are feeder systems. Maybe they feed into a larger system. And I hate to say it, but a busload of school children is a busload of school children. And no matter where that happens, if something were to happen, it would be devastating for our country. So yeah, our focus, we tend to stay, our offices tend to be the ones that are the most heavily populated. But I tend to see our inspectors actually spend a lot of their time outside of those city limits, working with those rural agencies. And again, I said we only have 200 inspectors, so it may take us a little while to schedule a trip and to get out there. But I promise you, if you have a need and if you're willing to work with us and make those changes that we recommend, we'll get somebody out there to work with you.
Very nice. Joe Hirth asks, Jeremy, do you have any recommendations to leverage video surveillance systems to help prepare and possibly monitor any threatening situations?
Are you talking about on your vehicles, at your station, or just?
So Joe, if
cameras?
if you want to unmute and or put it, both on vehicle and fixed assets.
Yeah, so the video cameras are great. They're a great tool, but the unfortunate part is you have to have somebody monitoring them, and not only monitoring them, but know what to do if they see something on it. So oftentimes we find transit systems, when we come out and do the basis, transit systems will have hundreds of cameras, and they're so proud of the fact that they pan, tilt, zoom, and their color. But then there's just a bank of monitors on the wall with nobody monitoring it. So, maybe it's a great system to have in place, but if you can't afford to have an employee monitor those cameras, and not only monitor them, but know what to do. So we see a lot of our systems are going to automated technology to look for anomalies that happen on those systems so that they don't have to have a person there. It really depends on your system, the size of your system, and the amount of resources you can dedicate to a camera system. We can certainly work with you. We have a fine line here at the TSA. We can't really tell you what to do, nor do we want to be responsible for telling you what to do, but we can certainly make some recommendations or options for consideration, or certainly share with you some things we've seen other agencies do. But really, it's going to be your plan and your policy and what's going to work best for you financially and within the constraints of your staff.
Very good. All right, I want to move us for just about 5 minutes and into crisis communication and social media, and then I want us to go into breakout for just maybe 10 minutes for discussion. So that's what we have on the docket right this second. What I want to point out about crisis communication and social media is that a lot of times, you guys know this, things can be escalated very quickly if you have the wrong person as your spokesperson, if you have too many people as your spokesperson, if you haven't thought through how and what needs to be communicated and to whom, and then social media just will eat our lunch. So with that, I'd like you to launch the poll, Rich, about crisis communication. Real quickly, take this poll so that we see where you guys are. Do you have a crisis communication plan in place? So if you can go ahead and answer that, we'll give everybody a chance to vote on that. And once you've answered that question, then I want you to turn to the chat box, and if you do have a plan, what's the one key element, or what's the gotta have in a crisis communication plan? Share that in the chat box with everybody. What is the absolute thing that you have to have? And just name one or two of them. So I've got you multitasking here.
And Kristen, we have about 61% of folks having voted. And should I go ahead and share the results here?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. So well, there's a plurality here, but the folks that do or do not have a policy, most do. But there's a good number of systems and agencies that don't have one currently, and then some folks aren't sure.
Very good. And I'm seeing some answers come in. Coordination with public safety agencies, proper chain of command, social media outreach is critical. What are some other ideas that you have? Effective communication platform. Anything else that you guys can think of that are the have-tos? And I have seen some folks in communications on this call. So let's see. Woe-way comms with writers. Oh, two-way. Two-way communication with writers. Thanks, Hugh, for changing that, because I was about to ask, what's a woe-way? Elizabeth says, one point of information going out, a PIO that is solely responsible for dissemination. Absolutely. And would you guys say that a crisis communication plan is a one and done? Do you just create your plan and put it on the shelf and take it down when it's ready to use? Or is it more of a living, breathing document that needs work? So you can chat that in the box as well, one way or the other. I am now going to move us into a breakout session, and we're not going to be in here long, 10 minutes or less. When you get into your breakout session, thank you, Hugh. Yes, I believe it's a living document that you've got to stay on top of because your personnel may change that you've identified within the plan, and the people that you need to contact. Elizabeth, you're right. Not every crisis is the same. One structure fire is different from the next. Very good. You guys can continue chatting with each other about that. But going to breakout, I want you to automatically just identify somebody. Somebody just say, yeah, I'll report out from our group. Okay, which means you need to take notes and then be ready to report out when we come back in. Now that you've had a chance to hear some ideas, here's what we want to know. What are your concerns about the upcoming election and the days to follow that have to do with your community? It really kind of goes to what made you interested in coming to this particular session. So what are your concerns? And then as you're sharing your concerns, please also share with each other solutions that you're implementing. This is the part of the program where we want you to talk to each other. So I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. It'll do it automatically. It's magic. If you get in there, I think I've tried to match up those of you who are both have your computer and your telephone. If you had your name on both of them, I've tried to match you up. The other thing that I'd like for you to do is if you have a camera on and you go into that small breakout room, go ahead and turn your camera on so that you can see each other. So we're going to go into breakout rooms in 3, 2, and 1. Everybody in this group right here, can you unmute and talk to each other? Can you guys hear me? Bryant, Letitia, Christopher, Terry, Angie, Marina, Carlos, are you guys in here? Okay. All right. Now, who is speaking right now? Hello? So, Bryant, can you hear me? Or Dana? Lupita? Christopher? Letitia? Carlos? Can any of you hear me? Okay, so Bryant, you can hear me. And Letitia, you do hear me, but I can't hear you. Oh, you don't have a mic or a camera. Okay, I understand, Letitia. Bryant, are you able to talk to me? And Lupita, you can hear. Can any of you unmute and talk to me? Are you able to do that? Okay, well, I'm sorry. We're going to be in here just for a couple more minutes. If you want to just hang in there. Okay, who's making noise now? Because I can finally hear somebody.
I think it's me, but
Is
my
that
problem.
is that me, Chris?
Yeah, it's Christopher.
Hey, okay, all righty. Well, since I think several of the other people can't unmute, tell me where you're from and talk to me a little bit about your about your what you guys are thinking about Election Day.
I'm in Amarillo, Texas right now. I work with the City of Amarillo Transit.
Okay.
As far as Election Day, we don't do anything specific. I've been hearing everybody talk about the free rides or anything like that. We're not doing anything other than our normal business operations for that specific day. We don't anticipate anything. We haven't heard anything from our police department or anything. So we're just kind of
Okay.
forth as normal.
Okay. All righty. Nice. And tell me why you joined the conversation today. Why you chose to come to the Zoom meeting.
When we initially seen it pop up, we kind of thought it would be something interesting to listen to. We kind of had some stuff with the TSA. They've been to our agency before, and they've done some of the things talking about earlier.
Good.
Listening to the chief from DART, that was really good information to listen to because he has a security perspective on providing that safety for passengers. So we just thought it was something good to get on, listen to, hear some different perspectives from other agencies on what they're dealing with and how they plan on, if anything, making some policy changes for that specific day and probably the day afterwards.
Good. Good. Okay. Chief Spiller is always really good. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead, and I think I'm going to bring everybody back into the big room. So if you guys are ready to do that, I'm sorry for whatever reason the rest of you were unable to participate in this part of it. You can always call in if you need to. So I'm going to close the rooms, and we're going to finish out our discussion. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, was that I hope that was a good conversation, and I want to hear from some of you what your thoughts were out of your group. I'm going to start with Rich. Rich, which room did you go into?
I forget which room I was in, but we were having some discussions on, trying to determine in real time as situations develop, what locations are going to, but also in terms of protests and any civil unrest, but also transit hasn't really been the tool that most of these folks have used. Most of them have arrived in private vehicles and other means, as opposed to, especially getting on a scheduled fixed route bus route. Maybe a little more on rail transit, but so far the folks in our group didn't really see specific connections between large protest groups and riding transit. Kind of like not a loud connection between passing COVID actually on the vehicles. I think we get blamed a little bit sometimes when we don't even have a role in it. So that was one aspect. And we were just starting to get into the conversation of whether there was any objections from city councilors or things like that when police either commandeer or have an agreement in place to use vehicles during protests. I don't think there's much concern when there's an emergency, like a explosion or a natural disaster, of transit being a full participant in the emergency response. But when you're talking about political things, it's a little different. So those are some of the things that we are getting into.
Very good, very good. And I did see some comments. Man, we just got started talking, and it was a speed conversation. So I apologize that was the case, but we, I wanted to bring you back and hear from all of you. I'm going to go to breakout room 1, and Hugh, you were a part of that. Do you know who it was that was going to be your reporter, or do you want to tell us about what you talked about?
Yeah, Doug was kind enough to nominate me in the last 10 seconds of the session.
Okay. All right. That's
still
Doug.
Smarting, I suspect, from the drubbing that Kansas City gave Denver. The big thing is we don't know what's going to happen. We had Austin in our group, Kansas City, Denver. If the left wins, there is a potential of right wing. If the right wins, there's a potential of left wing. Most of our problems are not on the buses. They're situational in where the buses, the routes, the operators come in contact with street demonstrations or closures, and we have to respond to that. But we've had the same experience here. No issues with the buses being used to go to and from civil unrest, but we generally have to move around them. And we've got a good group of road supervisors and security officers that keep our buses free of that to the degree we can.
Very good. Very good. Okay, thank you for sharing out of group 1. Group 2, I'm going to pick on Daryl just because he spoke a few minutes ago, but Daryl, was someone nominated in your group to be the reporter?
Yeah, you should buy a lottery ticket. I was the one nominated, so you got that right.
Okay.
Yeah, we the consensus was really that we had a pretty wide representation from Eagle Pass, which is a small town in Texas, Wichita, Kansas City, San Antonio, and Austin. That election day, the 3rd, is going to look pretty routine, as far as just people getting to and from the polls. But probably the big concerns folks have is what's going to happen November 4th, especially after the winter is clear. It may not be November 4th. It may be later than that. But, what's the impact going to be at that time? That's when the protests are probably going to happen, and things could potentially impact service. And then how do we make those plans to be ready for that?
One of the things that transit agencies are training on that I've heard about is the heightened security check on the bus. So encouraging your transit drivers to just keep an eye out for any bags that are left or anything that's unusual, and make sure you're retraining or training or reminding about the protocols that they need to have in place. Just some simple, we've already said it, see something, say something, ideas in place can help keep us all safe. I'm going to guess that breakout room 4, Leanne, is your reporter. Am I right, Leanne?
No.
No? Well, okay. Well, I nominate you, though.
Oh, you would, because I got interrupted by my boss. So
Okay. Well, do you know who in your group was going to report out?
I don't. I know Louis was. He was pretty talkative.
Okay, Louis, you've got your camera on too, so let's let Louis report out for your group then. Oh, you got to unmute. Unmute for us.
Next time I will turn my camera off. How about that?
Christian did a great job.
Okay, so real quick, I think a lot of our reporting was similar to what everyone else is sharing. Concerns about, what happens the day of the election, especially after the polls close and perhaps going into the next day. It's a matter of what happens if there's a situation that just comes out of nowhere. If you begin to see people gathering together and then all of a sudden a protest transpires, and being able to reroute on the fly so that you can get bus operators and passengers that are riding those buses out of harm's way. So those are the things that we talked about. I think the other item that was pretty important was how do agencies have a method by which passengers on buses can communicate concerns that are taking place on the buses to the agency. And so I think there were a few of us that indicated that we do have some method of doing that. So that was pretty much what our conversation entailed.
You guys got a lot of work done in that short period of time. Going to move over to breakout room 5. Now, let's see. Elizabeth Carter, do you want to report out for your group? Or Ben Hodges? Hey, Ben, how about you?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so a couple disclaimers. I'm in the accounting department at Capital Metro, and I just started a month ago. So, but from my perspective, we had an individual from rural New Mexico, individual from the Houston Metro, and she spoke of they have a TransStar system of communication. So it sounded like that was kind of like an organized, robust infrastructure they have to communicate with the public. But yeah, overall, I didn't hear of anything specific to the election as far as planning.
Okay. All right. Well, except having a communication system in place is really important, it sounds like. Anybody else from Ben's group want to report out anything? And Ben, I am impressed that you joined up on this. So thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to group 6. We're just going to do real quickly a couple more here. So group 6 had Gail and Jessica and Bryant, Jonathan, Rebecca. Anybody want to report out from group 6? Don't all jump in there at once. Okay. Group 6, I'll come back to you. Group 7, let's see, Patricia Peters. How about you? Do you want to report out about your group and what you talked about, or Felix or Joe? And you have to unmute first.
I was in group 7. I can report out a bit if you'd like.
Okay, and is that Tara?
Tara.
Tara.
Yeah, I think we were similar. We had some people from Texas. I'm from Colorado. We had a policeman and a vendor, a few different people. Our concerns are similar. We don't know at this point who will win, who will lose, what that result will be, who's going to be angry. So we felt it was important to have contingencies in place now. We talked about the locations that would affect our routes, mainly City Hall, courthouses, and police operations centers. And those are the same places we personally experienced protests this summer. And so it's mainly been having detours in place to avoid those areas. One person from our group, they were planning detours in advance. They've got bridges that lead to their city center, right up to the Capitol. And so they're looking at what do they do if those bridges get blocked and how are they going to get work transit around that. So just having contingencies in place because we don't know what's going to happen.
Good. Thank you very much, Tara. Rich just posted in the chat an article out of Chicago. Rich, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Just noting, that when there were earlier protests in the spring, mostly around the police issues, Chicago started shutting down their transit system quickly and without much notice. And I thought some background, I don't think we necessarily had those issues maybe in the SWTA Nation, but communicating when transit is being changed quickly is a real big deal, particularly for folks that aren't even related to the protest, who are counting on that service to get home or get to medical appointments. We have to be very careful on when, if things materialize, that we let people know properly and not make changes hastily, unless it's dire physical, stress. So I think that's kind of the point I was making with sharing that article.
Very good. Okay, I'm not certain if Chief Spiller and Jeremy are still on the line, but given a lot of the things that you've heard and the polls that you've seen, Chief and Jeremy, do either one of you have anything you'd like to add or any closing remarks?
Yes, I will. And I've got to say, I wasn't able to get into some of the rooms, so I've just been listening here. A lot of the things I heard about video, what I would do first is check with the cities to see if they have what they call the city cams or neighborhood cameras, and see how and if you can get access to that information. And quite often you find that in most areas, transit has probably more cameras than the cities, especially on the buses. And you can use that to your advantage to get them to come and sit with you to talk about how your cameras may help them as you are traveling throughout the cities. Because quite often we find, for instance, there was a shooting that took place, and just so happened there was one of our buses coming around that corner that captured that shooting. He captured all of it. Now it takes a bus out of operation for a while, but the beauty of that is that we in Dart Police, we control all of the cameras, so we were able to quickly provide that information to the cities, and we have protocols for that. In the areas of communications, we have communications persons that sit in our rail operations center. So as soon as something happens, they are the ones responsible for getting that information out on all the social media feeds, letting people know what's happening in the case we have delays with our buses or trains, and doing that exchange with them, as well as getting it out to the radio and television stations. So that's that one voice. And they have the capability of getting information not only from rail operations center, but the bus control center, as well as police dispatch, to make sure that they're getting the correct information and getting it out. And Kristen, I didn't hear some of the other things because I have some phones going off in my ear here. Okay. But I'll gladly attempt to address any of those that you think I may have missed.
Okay, I am going to jump to Jeremy just for a second to see if there's any closing remarks or anything that he heard he wanted to address.
I had to step away for a little bit as well. Just want to really thank everybody for being on the call today. I really appreciate your dedication to the mission and providing this essential service to the public out there. You guys are the real heroes. Your frontline operators are too. And, as most of you are probably executives or higher up, we really owe it to those frontline operators to provide them with as much training and as much support as we possibly can, because they're pretty much isolated out there. And I know you're all doing a great job with that. And any way that I can help or the TSA can help, we want to do as well. So just want to thank everybody, Rich and Kristen, for inviting me on here today. And just best wishes for this busy week, and everybody stay safe.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Rich, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank everybody. Thank you all for being here. So Rich.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you to Chief Spiller and to Jeremy Towne for joining us today. And thanks for all of you for joining in the discussion here today. We will be sending out the recording here after we're done. So feel free to look for that and share it with your colleagues at your agencies. This will wrap up our session here today. We'll be doing more of these expert leadership sessions throughout the fall and as we get into 2021. If there's a topic or idea that you want us to spend some time on, like this one, just let us know and we will get some folks together and get your peers engaged in sharing their ideas and thoughts with you. So thank you, everybody. We hope that you all stay safe and continue doing the great work in supporting your frontline folks and moving your communities to vote and everything else they need to do going on right now. So thanks, and we'll see you again real soon with the SWTA Nation, other events we have coming up.